new fears as crime soars in some of the biggest cities across the country: Houston, Atlanta, Baltimore, Chicago, New York, Milwaukee. This as police now fear legal and political backlash for simply doing their jobs. Has the so-called Ferguson effect caused a permanent end to the 2 decades-long decline in crime? Let's ask Milwaukee County Sheriff David Clark, who joins me now. Good evening, Sheriff. Police are now being looked at as the enemy. They are being targeted for death themselves. What incentive is there for a police officer to do his or her job?
Well, first of all, good evening, Judge. There is no incentive right now, but I'm going to make it clear that the American law enforcement officer has not quit on their cities. They've quit on the political class, but the criminals are in charge of the streets right now. They've been watching all of this, too. They know that the police are on their heels. They know they have the support, the criminal that is, of the political class. And you couple that with some failed social engineering experiments that have been going on with sentencing reform, prison reform, where they're trying to eliminate the use of jails and prisons as a crime control tool. And we know jails and prisons work. So you couple that with a law enforcement officer who's hesitating now to engage in proactive and self-initiated policing. You couple those two things together and you see this disaster. I predicted this disaster was going to come several years ago in Milwaukee, so here it is today.
You know, Sheriff, both you and I have been in this business a long time. I mean, I remember the 80s, the 70s, and for 20 years, crime has been going down. Do you expect to see it continue to rise? I mean, we're just seeing this increase. Some places, 80%, 50%, 140% increase in homicides in some of the biggest suburban areas. Is it going to keep going up?
I expect this level to be maintained. As you know from your experience, these rises in crimes, they don't happen overnight. This has been coming for some time now. And now that we've turned the engine off of the American police officer, you know them, they're type A personalities. They run at high RPMs. They're go-getters. Once you shut that engine off, it's very hard to restart. But I believe that if we rebuild the morale of the American police officer, restart that engine, we can go back out there and get control of these streets and drive crime down once again.
How do we rebuild their morale? They're targeted for death. You've got, coming from the White House, the mayor of New York City. I mean, the demonization of our police by the political class, as you call it, is horrific.
Sure, but it's going to take the law enforcement executive like myself, like police chiefs, to go to the political class and tell them to back off, knock it off. You saw Commissioner Batts of the Baltimore Police Department threw his police department overboard when he said, "We are the problem. We are why the problems in Baltimore exist," and he blamed the police officer. The other thing that I think we have to do is reassure the law enforcement officer we're going to have their back. Things are going to go wrong in this chaotic world that the officer resides in, but the officer needs to be reassured that it's going to be the rule of law that's going to be the standard, not mob rule, not mob justice, so that they can go back to work, do this thing, get control of the streets, and start serving the people in the way that they took an oath to do.
You know, there has been a huge drop in New York City, of course, in the stop and frisk, and concomitantly, crime is increasing. And, the mayor, de Blasio, can say whatever he wants to say, but, I mean, clearly, in my mind, there's a connection. So, with this political correctness, aren't more and more African Americans becoming victims of crime, victims of homicide, because there isn't the stop and frisk of the people who are looking to shoot them?
Sure, and the liberal mainstream media hasn't helped either. Being the propaganda wing for these false narratives about the law enforcement officer. Look, so these initiatives work. Broken windows, the Terry stops, or some people call them stop and frisk, in concentrated fashion. If some mistakes are being made with that, you tighten it up. You don't throw the baby out with the bathwater with those police initiatives. Retraining, re-education on what a Terry stop is, a lawful stop. You send those officers back out to work in those concentrated numbers like they're doing in New York City and like we were doing in other cities across America. Go back to work in those concentrated levels and restore, like I said, reassure them, restore their morale, and you know what? We'll get control of the streets. But right now, the criminal is in charge of the streets in these urban centers.
And that is a sad commentary. Sheriff Clark, I'd love to be a fly on the wall when you guys approach the political class about your concerns. Thanks so much for being with us.
You're very welcome.
Coming up, President Obama